So we saw last time that the figure of Jesus has been understood in an incredible variety of ways throughout history. In our own time, communities and individuals understand Jesus in ways that are responsive to their own experience and needs. And the list of examples we looked at by last time, like I said, is by no means conclusive. I hope that each of you has taken some time since our last lecture to think about some other characterizations that you've known in your own life through friends, family, community members, or yourself. It's a wide variety, and it's worth considering. But today we'll turn our attention to the historical record, to the cultural, political, and textual context into which Jesus was born. And we might note first that Jesus himself left no writing, no autobiography, and very little of what he said can be recovered with any sense of historical confidence. So we just want to know that to begin with. That said, historians have been at work on this figure. Lots of people are concerned to find out, what really happened. He was probably born around 5 BCE to a peasant family in the Lower Galilee, a region that you can see on this map. And I encourage you to stop and blow this up a little. I know it's small, but it's high resolution, so you can see it more clearly if you blow it up. In all likelihood, Jesus was educated only through oral training in the local synagogue. Remember the synagogue, a Greek word. At this time, synagogues functioned mainly as identity-making clubs, identity-maintaining clubs for Jews in an era of great persecution. Now remember that the Maccabees had taken control of Judea, a geographical region that roughly overlaps today's Israel, in 165 BCE, having revolted against the Seleucids. Remember the Seleucids, who were descendants of, and really kind of the last gasp of, the Greeks. At this time, many a Jew spoke Greek, and it was during this time that the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, a translation that's come to be known as the Septuagint. That's a word rooted in the word 7 or 70, because 70 rabbis in 70 rooms, left alone to their own devices, were called upon to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek, and by a miracle of God, because this is in some ways the word of God given into Hebrew, and so how can you translate it without losing meaning? Well, they all came up with exactly the same translation, and so it was accepted. Anyway, the Hasmonean dynasty, instituted by the Maccabees, survived for about 100 years, during which time the Romans began to gain ascendancy over the Greeks. Another way of saying this is that the dominant power shifted from the Greek Empire to the Roman Empire, and this map here shows you what the Roman Empire looked like around the time of the birth of Jesus. So it was changing, it was expanding, but it was definitely big. The Romans annexed Israel in 63 BCE. Julius Caesar named himself dictator for life at this point and was assassinated in 44 BCE, named himself dictator for life in 44 BCE and was assassinated the same year, at which point Augustus becomes emperor in 31 BC, and it was to Augustus, also known as Octavian, to which the Herod of the Bible had to submit himself. So this is where the stories really start to become intertwined. The Hasmonean dynasty gave way to the Herodian dynasty, named after Herod the Great, who, among other things, rebuilt the Second Temple in about 20 BCE. Now remember that this Second Temple had initially been built right after the Babylonian exile, and finished up in about 516 BCE, but had since that time fallen into disarray, and Herod the Great spruced it up in a grand rebuilding campaign. This wasn't just new curtains. This was a full-blown rebuilding project. Now, dynasties aside, remember that Rome is in charge here. Herod the Great was a Roman king of Judea, called himself Basileus, meaning king in Greek, still at the time the common language. When the Gospels report Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is within you, it's this word that he uses. And this should make apparent something that we'll see more of later. Jesus' spiritual claims were at this time also politically revolutionary claims that would have been heard by the ruling elite as socially disruptive, to say the least. It's one thing to say the kingdom of heaven is within you, and we sort of imagine, oh, it's up in the clouds, but really it's in me. But at the time, using the same word, it's like saying the Congress of heaven is within you, or the presidency of heaven is within you. It sounded and was meant to sound revolutionary in political terms. So Herod the Great has gone down in history as leading many building campaigns. It wasn't just the temple, but it included the rebuilding of the Second Temple, but he wasn't completely trusted by Jews at the time. He was himself descended of converted Jews, and his authentic commitment to Judaism was consistently questioned by the Jews in his charge. He supported the oppressive Roman Empire and was notoriously brutal in doling out punishment to Jews in his community. Now, Herod the Great died right about the time Jesus was born. Before we leave him, let's look at this is a model of the Second Temple rebuilt by Herod the Great. But he dies right about when Jesus is born. This is the Herod who in the New Testament orders the census that caused Mary and Joseph to travel during Mary's pregnancy to be counted, and because of which Jesus was born in a manger. So the story goes, this is not the Herod whom Jesus will be sent to later in the narrative to be judged before his crucifixion. When Herod the Great died, Palestine was divided between his sons, one of whom was also named Herod Antipas. And that's the Herod to whom Jesus is sent during the period of his crucifixion. Like his father, he also curried favor with Rome and was generally distrusted by the Jews. So that's the political context in brief. Now, the Jewish cultural context at the time of Jesus' birth is what we'll turn to now. There were several groups of Jews living in community and working together at this time, and a fair amount of tension between those groups. Each group believed that they should be able to define the priorities, the spiritual dogma, and the proper ritual of Jewish experience. Each group believed that their interpretation was the correct one. Now, in the interest of time, we'll talk about only two of these groups, whose role in the gospel is the greatest and who maintain the strongest presence in the center of the debate in Jerusalem, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. This chart is taken from the, quote, the religion teacher online. You can see it at the image source on the bottom, and I've posted, for your viewing pleasure, a video in which this guy talks at some length about the difference between these two groups, and I recommend that video to you here, but here we'll just treat the two groups very briefly. The Sadducees were a group of, or in cahoots with, elite priestly families. They were concerned with the continuation of temple ritual, which was where priestly authority primarily resides. Cooperation with Roman authority was important for the Sadducees because the Romans had the power to keep them out of the temple. And they did cooperate with Rome for political and practical reasons. But on the whole, the Sadducees distrusted foreign influence. They wanted their leaders to be Jewish, and they wanted the Torah to remain at the center of Jewish life. Any external influence, any external interpretation was seen as potentially threatening to their priestly authority and to their understanding of how things should be. In this way, they were pretty conservative or resistant to change. Their focus is on Jewish practice in this life, now, and that had a great deal to do with the temple. Now, in a constant state of tension with the Sadducees was the Pharisees. These folks were less temple-oriented. They were far more focused on the synagogue. They were synagogue teachers or rabbis. We've heard a lot about these folks. Like the Sadducees, the Pharisees were concerned with the potentially devastating effect of foreign influence, but they were far less interested in temple ritual. Pharisees were more interested in individual ritual purity or the strict adherence to the kosher lifestyle or behavioral laws that are found in the Hebrew Bible. This lifestyle wasn't for them a simply this worldly concern. One's this worldly lifestyle shaped the eternal soul that the Pharisees believed all humans to have. What they saw as Greco-Roman laxity with respect to the Hebrew Bible's ritual prescriptions was a threat to the individual purity of their community members, and so they did their best to stop it. And one notable Pharisee was Paul of Tarsus. He wasn't a rabbi, he was a Pharisee, who wrote many of the letters now included in the New Testament. Before his dramatic conversion to Christianity on the road to Damascus, Paul was a great persecutor of the followers of Jesus because these followers didn't conform to Jewish law. They weren't as interested in that kosher lifestyle or the prescriptions set down by the Mosaic law. But they did claim the hard-won special consideration that the Romans offered to the Jews, and so they didn't sort of have to follow all the rules, but they still got all the perks. And Paul, among other Pharisees, was pretty adamantly against this, and so he was one particularly zealous, persecutor of these Jesus people before his massive conversion. Now, in addition to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, there were the Essenes, the Zealots, the Gnostics, and the Scribes, and tensions were building up between all of these groups, and all within the context of an oppressive Roman imperial rule. So Brutal rulers relentlessly taxed the Jews. Their physical safety and their financial well-being were always in question. The Jews, at this point, they were just buffeted from all sides. And this led to Jewish revolts, the most dramatic of which occurred between 66 and 70 CE, at the end of which the Second Temple is burned to the ground. No more temple. And on the eve of this destruction, with Roman troops at the gates, the Jews inside were engaged in a suicidal civil war. Things were not good for the Jews. And so many Jews maintained their hopefulness by looking for the Messiah, or the Anointed One, who had been promised by the Hebrew Bible prophets. The Messiah would be a political leader of great spiritual strength, chosen by God to lead the Jewish people into a time of great political stability and peace. It would be someone on the model of David or Solomon. And not all Jews agreed on exactly what the Messiah would look like or how his character would be shaped, how he would act, but they did all look to the prophets for evidence, and so we'll look to a couple of them here. This is from Isaiah 11. A shoot will come up from the shoot of a branch will come up from the shoot of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, of counsel and might, of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. The wolf will live with the lamb, leopard will lie down with the goat, calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. And so this goes back to the Hebrew Bible, looking towards the Messiah in a way that reverses those common sense expectations about the world and sort of looks to God to reestablish a new sort of political life. And here from Ezekiel, my servant David will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. And so here we see that model of the shepherd called forth, and the Davidic line, how important it is to maintain that lineage. They will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children's children will live there forever. And David, my servant, will be their prince forever, and I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant, and we'll see this. This is the new covenant that Christians speak of and hang a great deal of their spiritual lives on. And finally, from Daniel, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man. This is something again that Jesus will be called, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days, understood by Christians to be God the Father, and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. And here we have the missionary, inclination sort of spelled out preemptively. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And so there's this hopefulness. Now, this sense of divinely anointed kingship had long been part of Jewish consciousness. Messianic expectation had long characterized Jewish hopefulness, and it still does for many Jews today. With the Jesus movement, the idea of the Messiah was transformed, understood in terms of incarnation or divine embodiment, rather than in terms of a political leader chosen by God. All of a sudden, this was going to be God embodied. And for these early followers of Jesus, God had chosen to be born into human form, to lead his community directly. And that was a difference. That was a change with the Jesus movement, who would come to be called Christians. So, as in this image, the trappings of royalty are reimagined back onto the prenatal experience of Jesus. Coming as the king from heaven and born into human form through a particularly, unsullied by sin mother. Next time we'll look to the gospel narratives and at how the life of Jesus, after he's born and the Messiah is, embodied, how the life of Jesus is presented in those gospels.